So for this video, I'm going to be doing a deck spotlight on Mid Dagoth. This is the deck that I've played more than any other deck so far this season. Played it a lot on my way to Legend. I've been playing it a lot since I've hit Legend. I've had a lot of success with it, and I wanted to go over the list and share it with you guys. So let's just dive right into the list. As we can see, there's not necessarily the best curve here. The early game is not like, hey, I'm guaranteed to have a 2-drop, but there are a lot of comeback mechanics in this deck, and I think that's one of the reasons that I enjoy it. This is not your traditional, like, I have to play on curve mid-range deck, and if I miss, I'm just auto-losing. That being said, you want to play on curve. It's better if you play on curve. Do not misunderstand me. You want to aim for those early game drops when you're mulliganing, but if you don't get them, you're not out of the game, and I think that's just what I really like about this deck so far. So, we run, for 1-drops, Crown Quartermaster. That's the only one that's a body here, but it's one of the best 1-drops in the game. In Dagoth specifically, giving you that dagger means that you can a lot of times make something with 4 attack, hit 5 attack, trigger those awesome Dagoth effects, trigger things like Ash Berserker. Crown Quartermaster also puts that dagger into your hand. That matters for things like Corner Club Gambler, which we'll cover in a little bit. So yeah, Quartermaster. Outside of that, we also run Firebolts. This is strictly for Goblin Skulk. I hate Goblin Skulk. Goblin Skulk can die in a fire. Literally a firebolt, so I do run it. Rapid Shot here. This is a fantastic cycle card. It's also a nice pitch card, again, for your Corner Club Gambler. Rapid Shot also helps set up board wipes when you're trying to play with Skaven Pyromancer or with Cradle Crush Giant. So that's another reason that it's in here. Shadow Shift, fantastic utility card. It also cycles. Moving creatures around is, I think, oftentimes underestimated, underlooked. In a deck like this where you've got drain creatures you want to keep alive, in a deck like this where you've got ward creatures you want to take advantage of, you get a lot of value out of it. And it combines really well with another card that I'll get to in a minute, and that's Telvanni Courier. So that's it for our 1-drops. Now we're going to go to the 2-drops. Deck does run Awakened Dreamer. This is one of those Dagoth effects, so if you have something with 5 or more power, it starts getting bigger. A 2-3 for 2 is entirely fine, but a 3-4 for 2 is fantastic, so it's just kind of like an auto-include in my opinion. Mournhold Trader, one of the better 2-drops in the game. The drawback here is pretty well negated because we have Firebolts and Rapid Shots and Skavens and all sorts of things. So you don't really have to worry about that, but 4-4 stat line is great. Alright, my list runs Telvanni. Now, this has kind of become a pet card of mine. I'm jamming it into as many decks as I can because it's amazing how much better Steel Sword gets when you just put a 0-1 body on it. I didn't play a whole lot of Steel Sword, and I still don't, because by itself it's a fine aggressive card, but it's whatever. But giving it the 0-1 body means if I have nothing else going on for me, I can play this as a proactive 2-drop. Is that ideal? Probably not. You'd rather have something like Mournhold Trader or Awakened Dreamer. But if you have nothing else going on, being able to just slap down a 3-1 is oftentimes helpful. Now, the Steel Sword portion, however, is fantastic when you have cards like Awakened Dreamer. There's nothing like ringing out an Awakened Dreamer and then on the next turn playing a Courier, swinging for 5, and then letting that thing grow to a 6-4. It just feels really good inside. Also, looking a little bit ahead, this deck does run Ward Crafter. Being able to slap the Steel Sword on a warded creature, whether it's Ward Crafter, whether that's Daggerfall Mage, later on, obviously we run Hand of Dagoth. That is huge. It's so huge to get that much extra value out of your ward creatures. This deck runs a lot of Drain. Getting 3 extra health off of a Drain, it makes me feel so good when I can slap this thing on a Hand of Dagoth, a Queen of Baronzia, you name it. Telvanni, I love it in this deck. You'll see later on I run Merrick. Sounds silly, but the 0-1 body picking up a free item from a Merrick has won me, I think, 2 games so far this season. The 0-1 body being left behind means you can attach a tome from your Daggerfall to it. Even if you just need like 1 damage and you slap on one of those daggers from your Crown Quartermaster, there's a lot going on which what should be a very simple card. I love Satanine. It's kind of my pet thing. Yeah. Deck runs Shrieking Harpy because it's fantastic prophecy. It's a great tempo card. It's just one of those cards that you want to run if you're running intelligence. Wardcrafter, again, fantastic blue card. Good proactive drop. Good card for protecting your drain creatures, your big bodies. Great card for rewarding Daggerfall. Enough said. Brotherhood Slayer. So we're on to the 3 drops. This is here because as prophecy. This is here because it's green, and that's going to help out with some of our color balancing for our Dagoth Oathman. If I come down here and I mouse over this, you'll see green is our smallest color in terms of representation. So Brotherhood Slayer is to this deck what it's just what it needs. Sorry, I'm trailing off there for a moment. It helps with representation. Prophecy is also pretty welcome. The Slay effect is nice if you're trying to ramp up into some of your better late game threats. So yeah, we like everything about that. Corner Club Gambler. Fantastic draw engine. Even better if played off of the ring. And we've got a lot of stuff we can pitch to this card, so it's pretty easily negating its own drawback. Again, we've got Crown Quartermaster. Sometimes Rapid Shot, Firebolt, those are dead cards. You can pitch those. Yeah, there's, Tome isn't like great. You'd like to use your Tome, but if you get a Tome from Daggerfall and you really need something to pitch, sometimes that helps. In other matchups, Skaven Pyromancer is dead, so you can pitch that. This deck is pretty flexible, and so knowing what your matchups are and what's good in them and what's bad in them can really help negate the drawback of Gambler. Daggerfall Mage. It's been good since the game was released. Nothing really changes here. Dagoth Oathman. The best advice I can give about this is that you don't have to wait until it's a 5/5. A 4/4 for 3 is still pretty damn good, and if you really need to play something on curve, a 3/3 for 3 is not the end of the world. But I play this more often as a 4/4 for 3, but it turns out that's good enough. People have been running Young Mammoth for a long time, and Oathman as a 4/4 for 3 is fine. Skaven, only running 2 here. It's really good in the matchups. It's really good. Slapping it down, killing a bunch of tokens, or even just setting up some good value trades is great. But in the matchups where it's not good, it's like kind of not as good. That's obvious, but so that's why I only run 2. And again, like I said, if you're in one of those matchups where it's not great, it's a fine card to pitch to your Gambler. Yeah, Skaven Pyromancer. Then we're on to the 4 drops. Ash Berserker. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you're running an aggressive deck or a mid-range deck and it's a strength deck, you want to run Ash Berserker. We've got a lot of cards that have 5 or more power just naturally, as we'll see a little bit later on. Early game, again, if you did manage to trigger Oathman as a 5/5, it'll auto-trigger your Berserker. Early game, you also have Crown Quartermaster to potentially help with the daggers. Yeah, Ash Berserker. Earthbone Spinner. This deck is not necessarily an aggressive deck. While it has a lot of 1-drops, I don't think it has enough in it to consistently proc a Hlaalu Sharpshooter, but silence is really important, so that's why I'm running Earthbone Spinner over Sharpshooter. If you have a preference, that's fine, but that's just the reason I'm doing Spinner. Lightning Bolt, because it's reach, prophecy, removal, you name it. That's pretty straightforward. Queen. Great card, also provides drain. You're going to see that we've got a decent amount of drain in here, and that's one of the things that allows this deck to pivot. So as I said at the beginning, if you don't have the best draw, there are great comeback mechanics. Skaven's one of those comeback mechanics. Earthbone Spinner on the right creature can be a big swing back in your favor. Queen, guarding up a lane, offering drain. It's great. Slapping Satanine on this, draining 9 health. Great. Slapping Sentinel Battle Mace, and that's the next 4-drop. On this or another drain creature, great. Since we're here, we'll just go ahead and talk about Sentinel Battle Mace. It's reach. It protects your good threats. It's also a intelligence and a strength card, so it does count as blue for your Oathman. Just kind of keep that in mind. But yeah, Battle Mace, I mean, I shouldn't have to speak to the merits of this card. It's fantastic on just about anything you can throw it on. Going to the 5-drops. I'm running Blood Dragons. Blood Dragons trigger your Ash Berserkers. They also just have a lot of stats, and they help you control the board. They also let you be aggressive, right? It's just a good flexible card in a list like this. If you need to try to get control of the board, again, if you had a slow start, plopping this bad boy down, trading into whatever you want in any lane because you ignore guards and what have you, that can be really helpful. Popping this down and going face with it against a control deck, if they are specifically a control deck that doesn't have hard removal at their fingertips, that can go a long way as well. Telvanni, other than their lethal creatures, do not have good ways to deal with a Blood Dragon. It is really, really good in the Telvanni matchup. Typically against Telvanni, just as a heads up, you want to play this in the Shadow Lane to avoid Vipers. Even if it just buys you a turn, that's a big deal. Brynjolf, it's in here because of the same reasons that Queen is. It's just a great card. The drain helps. The whole like gain and extra magicka is also pretty helpful, because if you play this when you have 5 magicka and then on the following turn you have 6, but you hit, it takes you up to 7. That could activate things like Belligerent or Merrick as opposed to just your Cradle Crush. So Brynjolf is great in that regard. 3 Cliff Racers, because they are great. They are lightning bolts with bodies. You can use them as removal. You can use them as reach. They're either a face racer or a pace racer, where you're trying to slow down your opponent by trading. Hand of Dagoth. Hand of Dagoth is fantastic even after the nerf. Breakthrough, Drain, and Ward are all things this deck cares about. The Drain and Ward are huge, as I said before. Slapping Satanine on this, slapping a Mace on this, after you've lost the ward, to reward it, gain a bunch of health, you name it. It's great. Being tricolor triggers your Dagoth Oathmans. That's great. Hand of Dagoth, it's the reason to play Dagoth, like, let's be honest. Moving on to our late game stuff. So I run 3 Cradle Crush. The combination of Drain creatures, Skaven, and Cradle Crush, I have found has made this deck very, very good and very resilient against aggressive decks, specifically aggro Redoran, aggro Crusader, and aggro Halalu. I'm not saying I've won every game against them, but I'm very, very favored in the games that I've been tracking. They have a hard time dealing with things like Hand of Dagoth followed by a Cradle Crush Giant, so that's why Cradle Crush is in here. Belligerent, this is a fantastic tempo card. I very rarely use this to destroy an enemy support. I'm not saying that I don't do that, but this is much more often like bounce whatever your most expensive threat is to make you reinvest that magicka. Specifically like Sower of Revenge. If you are in a close game or a tight mirror and you bounce somebody's Sower and make them have to re-spend 5 and deny them that damage even for a turn, it's a big deal. I do run Merrick. I know a lot of Dagoth lists don't, but there's enough sticky and resilient threats here that I think he's worth it. There's enough drain here where sometimes just getting, a +3/+3 item or whatever on your drain creature can be a big deal. Again, Satanine leaves those 0/1s behind, and you'd be surprised how often people just leave them there. So getting free items on a Satanine has been hilarious. It's a one of, right? If you don't want to run it, I'm not gonna tell you you're wrong, but the fun that this card has afforded me for just one slot has been worth it. Uncano, because let's be honest, we're playing Intelligence. I'm pretty sure he's just mandatory. 2 Vigilant Giants. These could be not Vigilant Giants if you wanted. They could be other things. I like them because they're a big body, they're must answer, and they replace themselves. The fact that they draw a card is what makes me choose to run these. If you really wanted more card draw, you could run like Eclipse Baroness, but oftentimes I'm not finding myself running out of answers unless it's just a really weird game. Because even against control decks, a lot of times the pacing against a control deck for a deck like this is you play like 1 to 2 like good enough creatures, and you use those to continue pressuring your opponent until they answer them, and then you continue playing like 1 to 2 good creatures. Just don't overextend, maintain constant but consistent pressure, and you'll go a long way. Giant fits perfectly into that plan. They nuke something, you play a giant, it draws you another card, they nuke your giant, you play whatever you drew. Like, it's just one of those things that says like you have to answer this, and if you don't, you're going to take a bunch and it replaces itself. So Yeah, I like giant. Aspect of Hircine is in here as like another giant, but with flexibility. Sometimes the 12-12 guard is the right play. Sometimes the 6-6 charge is just another Tazcad. The flexibility of this card is nice. I do just run it as a one of because we've already got a pretty big top end. But yeah, knowing your matchups, knowing what to choose and when can really help with this. And then finally Tazcad, because much like Ancano, it's a fantastic closer, provides good reach, and against control decks, leaving the body behind is oftentimes a really big deal. And that is the list. So the only thing I do want to mention is you may have noticed there's no Withered Hand Cultist here. That's for a couple of reasons. One, we actually run a fair number of actions in this list. Again, if I mouse over this, you'll see there are 12 actions. But also, this isn't like an aggressive deck where once I've played out my big board, I need to protect it. Withered Hand is usually used for that. So like if you're playing Halalu, you're playing Aggro Redoran, you develop a board, and then when you expect the Ice Storm, you play it to delay it for a turn or two, and you're looking to win in those turns. You don't really do that with this deck. I'm not saying Withered Hand is bad and that it couldn't be ran in this. I mean, if you want to really run it in here, you could, but I don't find myself ever often in a position where I'm like, I just need to buy myself 1 or 2 turns and I've used all of my cards. Like I said, this deck is much more about like consistent pressure as opposed to all-in gameplay. Yeah, that's why I chose not to include Withered Hand Cultist. Again, I've been very successful with this, even without Withered Hand. There's been very few games where I've said to myself, like, man, I really wish I had a Withered Hand. Anyway, that's the list. Now we're going to go ahead and do what I always do. We're going to dive into a couple of games, see the thing in action, and hopefully this helped you. Alright, so here we are on Mid Dagoth, and we are going second against spellsword. Now, depending on the kind of spellsword this is, this could end up being a pretty rough matchup for us. There's some token spellswords that if they get the drop on you and they go wide, they can cause some problems. Control spellsword, because they have such hard removal in terms of spot removal, if they get the right answers on curve, they can slow us down, because our game plan is to play just significant threats over and over. So, kind of curious to see how this goes. Hand got a little bit better with the ward crafter there. Alright, well, I think it's safe to say that this is going to be probably some aggressive form of spellsword, likely tokens.
Friend.
Being a mud crab here, there's also a good chance that this is Dwemer tokens. So Hulls of the Dwemer, as it turns out, is a pretty fantastic card. Blood Sacrament, huh? Wow. Wow. Right. So that's a dead card. This, not entirely done.
Your blood will spill. By the 8th, they will
But
meet their
we're just going to be over here trying to fight for control of this board. I would fully expect to see a mechanical ally here and reveal that it is in fact like Dwemer tokens. They run the mud crabs because they're a nice aggressive drop that is in neutral, so it ups your neutral count. But I could be wrong, could just be traditional spellsword tokens. But triple mud crab merchant is... That's an interesting way to start a game, that's for sure. Alright, so they take a trade. I'm not surprised by that.
I once knew a man from all my sword and my wit.
Wow, okay. So they exalt that and get lethal. We don't really need to prioritize drawing cards here, so now we just want to get rid of stuff. And this is one of those times where we showcase the strength of Satanine, I think.
I come bearing gifts.
And we just go ahead and take the value trade. Now, they could get this off the board, but if they don't, a tome on that allows that to potentially trade. It's also a nice body to just get guard and help protect Queen when she comes down. Again, it sounds so silly, but this little 01 has been kind of wonderful for me. Alright, so Dwarven Dynamo does come down. And I mean, the other option would be an Earthbone, but I have a feeling that we're going to need that silence, so we're just going to go ahead and take our value trade.
Violence.
We've got a lot of cards in hand here. And I got a feeling our opponent's about to vomit a whole bunch of dudes, unfortunately. Good news is this is a fantastic pitch card for Corner Club. The bad news is that if we play Corner Club, we're not really playing anything else next turn.
Greetings from the last.
Alright, so that's going to get back a Dynamo. Like, every day of the week that gets back Dynamo. Alright, Wordcrafter's not terrible for us here. Alright, so while we would like to play Corner Club to draw cards, we're not really hurting for cards right now, so part of that would just be playing the body. Likely going to play Earthbone the following turn, all things considered, because they're going to play that Dynamo. So, what are our best options? We do have this to maybe get back health at some point. I actually think we're just going to play this for the body, even if we don't draw the cards. I feel like this is probably our best chance at trading into some stuff there. Because again, I expect a Dwarven Dynamo to come down. If they trade into the Corner Club and we don't get to draw, it's not the end of the world. We lost a card that we were never going to play anyway. But getting the 4-3 on the board and saving this ring charge that we might need later, I think ends up being the right play. Now that we're at 6 Magicka, we have to be very cognizant of everything our opponent does because Halls of the Dwemer is a thing. For example, if they were to go like double Mechanical Ally over here, that would put us in a world of hurt for a number of reasons.
To be reduced to violence at my age.
Really surprised that they traded that way. Belligerent Giant on that feels pretty good. Though saving this for a Halls feels pretty good as well. Saving the Earthbone for the Dwarven Dynamo feels pretty good. So what is our plan of action here? Do we just develop the Queen now because it also represents a big threat? I don't know. Having the Earthbone available next turn also means having the Giant now. Again, not blowing up hulls kind of sucks, but dealing with that now actually feels even better the more I think about it. Let's go ahead and make this trade here. Let's go ahead and do that. And we're not really worried about charge in this matchup, so controlling field lane is important. So I think getting rid of this. Again, having them in a position where they have no board while we have something is, I think, beneficial. Our hand is just clunky because our only 3-drop is that Blood Sacrament, and we've got a bunch of 4-drops that we would like to play. So if we don't draw something you know, 3 or less next turn, leaving all that magicka unused is going to feel bad. Alright, so they play an Edict and a Dark Guardian, huh? Alright, so there is a Satanine, which is not terrible. We're probably going to lose this. I mean, we could use Satanine to just trade. And then develop Queen. I suppose that is one option. Does get rid of that on the board, and it does save our other creatures.
I come back.
So we'll go ahead and do that.
Your blood will spill. I am
It also means that if we do next turn at 8, if we have to play Earthbone plus an Ash Berserker, the Ash Berserker would get us a card that we could draw. We're in quite the slugfest here. Neither of us have broken a rune. It's been a lot of jockeying for position. I assume it's because our opponent is trying to set up a well-timed flood the board and then play Halls the following turn for victory, but we're gonna do our best.
As long as you're here, try to be useful.
Well, that does change a little bit. Changes a little bit. So if we Earthbone this and then Firebolt it, we remove it, but then we're not doing the Ash Berserker. We could Earthbone that and hope that this is enough to guard our creature for a turn, and then also develop Ash Berserker, and then use the Firebolt next turn, which is not terrible. But we do also know that they have a Dwarven Dynamo still in hand, and we're going to give them more cards. That's kind of a tough call. I really feel like drawing, because our hand is so clunky, is probably our best bet.
The forest will not suffer your presence.
I mean, if they... In spellsword, they don't really have a lot to do just 1 damage, so if they spend a removal on this, it's the same as if they had a removal for this anyway. So
We are not amused.
we're going to go ahead and do this. I'm okay with loading this lane. This is an aggressively positioned deck. I'm not worried about Dawn's Wrath. I'm not really worried about things like Immolating Blast. Now our Oathman, if this survives, our Oathman will be a 5/5 next turn, which will be pretty good for us. Whether or not we get to play it, that's a different story.
Training is over. It's
All right,
time
here
to act.
comes the cavalry. We expect them to flood the board here.
You can tell them you've done.
And there's the Steam Constructor. And I assume they probably got something else as well. No? Alright. I mean, Skaven's not bad, but it would be much better if that was a Cradle Crush, for obvious reasons. So right now it's looking like we are going to play this Dagoth Oathman. And we're probably going to play this, which means we will likely still Skaven over here. Even just pulling this off so it can't attack for 5 post-Halls is important enough. Let's go ahead and make this trade. Let's go ahead and develop our Oathman just in case they get a prophecy that negates this. We're going to wait on the rest of our turn until we wait and see what happens. So they are hitting a prophecy. We're kind of hoping it's the one that just draws a card, but a Javelin might be a thing here. They're really thinking about it. That tells me it's probably a Javelin, and they're trying to figure out what they want to kill more, the 6/3 Drain or the thing that lets me draw cards. That would be my guess. No, okay. Is just a spider worker. Well, I don't think that changes much for us. We're going to go ahead and take the firebolt here. And I mean, maybe it does change it for us. Maybe we do Skaven here. We're not really worried about the health of our creatures. Again, spellsword doesn't have a lot of ways to do damage. But if they have a Halls, this would then be able to trade. Whereas if we get rid of this and they have a Halls, they would have 5 and 6 is 11, 15. I mean, we're at 37. We're at a comfortable health. I don't think with Halls they have enough to burst us. So in that regard, I actually think that just getting rid of this ends up being the right choice. It's 1 less damage than removing this, but I don't think it makes these any more vulnerable, given that we're playing against Spellsword. And we do get that Cradle Crush. That might help us next turn. We only need to get 6 damage in because of Blood Sacrament. That's also worth noting. So even if they drop guards here, as long as the Queen gets to attack, that's enough to represent lethal. In fact, even without the Blood Sacrament, if even just Ash Berserker gets in, Aspect would have been lethal. We had a lot of options, so it's a fantastically navigated game. I think it went really well. So yeah, let's go ahead and open whatever I was going to open. Hey, we're up to 42. And then we'll jump into the next game. But I know people like to see rewards, so alright. Nothing fancy. Let's go ahead and dive into another game and see how the deck does. Alright. So we are going second against Crusader. And I gotta say, I'm really enjoying our opponent's name. The aggressively mediocre is kind of fantastic. Alright, this hand is not great against Crusader. We don't have anything that makes this bigger, so we get rid of that. I love Shadow Shift, it's great utility, but with no creatures early, I think we get rid of that. The only real question is whether or not you want to keep Earthbone here. With the ring, it's not necessarily bad. Earthbone can be a fantastic play, but without knowing for sure we're going to get other early game options, I lean in favor of getting rid of this because we really want 2 and 3 drops so that we can combat the early aggressiveness of Crusader. So sadly, our hand didn't get a whole lot better. We did find a 2-drop. That's very helpful. But the rest is arguably worse. I would have rather had a Shadow Shift to pair with that Ward Crafter in case we placed it in the wrong lane here to start. Obviously, Merrick, by the time that thing is relevant, well, game might already be over. Cliff Racer's not terrible. Its reach
Time to fight.
can potentially provide some value trades. Alright, well, we're going to go ahead and jump this over here, since our opponent is very clearly an aggressive opponent. I'm not super keen on losing
Your blood will spill.
losing my ward there. They may run away from this. So there is something to be said about maybe playing Seidanine over here just so we have presence in both lanes. The downside to that though is if they played like Mighty Ally over there, we have no way to trade up into it. They also very well could just, like if we play Seidanine here in the shadow, play Mighty Ally over there to run it away from this. Or, because it's in the shadow, we're stuck not being able to trade into said Mighty Ally. And then they just ping us with their own Nord Firebrand again. So I actually think that we simply pass here, which feels really, really bad. But we have a very clunky hand with 2 cards that cost more than 7. And without a nice top deck, it's not going to get a whole lot better. Alright, so they play a raiding party. I have to assume one of them is going to eat our Ward Crafter here. No reason for them not to, really.
Time to fight. Time to fight. Talos. Attack.
And yeah, there you have it. Well, our hand is continuing to just not be any better. Yeah. Rough. A bit of a bricked hand. This hand actually would have been not too shabby against certain control decks, specifically ones that start really slow out of the gate. We would have had a warded creature, some reach to throw on it, a lot of late game so that we could just kind of pile on once we hit that point, but against an aggressive deck, this is not great for us. Could have played Satanine again, but we just lose it to a Firebrand if it's field, and putting it Shadow doesn't do a whole lot for us. What we're not hoping for right now is like Candlehearth.
Come and warm yourself.
Alright, so there's a trader. We would have liked the trader some time ago. We're going to go ahead and just take the value trade. Now, there's a strong chance that they have a charge creature to trade back into that, but if they're trading and not attacking us, that's a kind of a win. If we can find... Oh, they have a crushing blow. Okay, that's fine too.
In the flames.
If we can find a... Drain creature, we kind of locked this game up. Like, Drain would be ideal. Man, this has the potential to be such a powerful play later. But I really want to get the body on the board as well. I think we're just going to go ahead and go like this. Save our ring charge, saturate our magicka. The other option is like Earthbone to contest, but then we just also lose Earthbone, where this represents a value trade. This looks really good in premium, though. I like that. I feel like that got a touch-up recently. I don't remember it being as flamingly fabulous.
I will prepare something special for them.
Okay. That is a Grizzly Gourmet. And he could even heal his guy if he really wants to. I would love to top deck a Cradle Crush Giant here to make up for all these bad draws. Let's walk into a good draw. That is no such thing, sir. That is not a Cradle Crush. So now we have an interesting decision because we could try to race them. We have Merrick, Ancano, and Tazcad potentially on curve for the next 3 turns. So if they don't have a way to kill that Mournhold Trader, we could double Satanine on it, swing for 10, and that would give us 3 potential bodies for Merrick the following turn. Now the chances of them having a charge creature to run into our guy are pretty strong, but that's a lot of burst, and they don't have a very big board at the moment. So it's the kind of risk that I want to take, I think. Now the other option is we could do a Satanine and an Earthbone to pull one of these off. It also saves this for a little bit of reach. It also means we only give them 1 rune. Also means this doesn't get to buff this. Alright, so I may have talked myself out of the second Satanine just now. So we're going to go ahead and swing.
The forest will not
We're going to get rid of that. See if they've got something that charges for 4 damage. Raiding Party could do it. Vigilante could do it. Some combination of chargers, right? Like Firebrand and Candlehearth or Orc Battle Rager. I still feel like, given the board's state, this is the correct play. All right. Crushing Blow plus like a Nord Firebrand or something. That's another way to get it done.
I'll even let you swing first.
Blood and fire.
Alright, so we're still going to get this Merrick on.
By Stendar's breath, we are ready for battle.
Alright, now if we wanted to, because we'll be able to play this next turn either way, we could just go ahead and use a Firebolt. And the truth is we do want to, I think, here, because protecting, like it turns this into pushing 4 damage. Protecting the board that we do have with the reach that we have feels really important.
The day is mine.
It's not like our opponent has a lot of cards in hand. He's very clearly playing an aggressive crusader, so it's not likely to have comeback mechanics. And as it is right now, we're like 1 off of lethal next turn with Encano, assuming they have no answer for the board, right? We do have 11, 16 in hand with more reach to back it up the following turn.
Time to fight.
All right, so they have a Nord.
I only need 1 shot.
They have a Nord and a sharpshooter. Okay. That's a fairly decent turn.
God's wisdom.
Blood and fire.
Now the drain is potentially concerning. Though if we played Awakened Dreamer and Oathman in this, the potential 2 drain is really not that much of a concern. That's actually a pretty interesting prospect. So we could either play Encano and nuke this, which would push 7, or we could just pretty superiorly develop our board, which is something I'm a bit of a fan of right now. So I think we're going to go ahead and do that so that this becomes a 5/5.
Before the 6th house.
And then we're going to go ahead and put this here.
Gifts.
For guild and glory.
And sway. So they'll get to gain 2. They'll probably get to pull 5 damage off the board, but with them being at 12, we'll still have 10 damage on the board, along with our choice of 5 or 6. So continued pressure feels correct. Now they could buff the drain creature, right? It's possible instead of being at 12, they could be, at 15 or 16. Fervor is a step in the right direction there.
Hermamora tests us. Time to fight.
Raiding party does mean that they have the ability to clear here.
They missed their shot. Vivek, guide my blade.
Blood and fire.
All right, so we have 3. And then we have 5, and so unless they hit like a Dark Harvester or something silly that we don't expect, Tazcad or Encano gets it done, and there you have it. It's a victory. So,
My thanks.
yeah, hopefully, hopefully this list helps or jumpstart some ideas for you. There are some cards you could swap in and out if you don't like it as is. This is just what's been working for me. And, thanks for watching. Until next time, may you walk on warm sands.